You've been asking questions, Riley, about things above your pay grade. Maybe it's time you take that curiosity elsewhere.
I didn't reply. I didn't need to. His words said everything about him, and nothing about what I was worth. I didn't ask for much, just the bonus I had earned after saving the company 3 quarters in a row. They say silence is golden, but in corporate America, silence is often mistaken for weakness. For me, that Monday morning in November started like any other, but I should have known the shift in the wind wasn't just outside. I had a strange feeling when I stepped off the elevator, the kind of feeling you get when people look up from their desks just a second too long, when they hush their voices mid-sentence, and when the office coffee is unusually strong, like someone was trying to smooth over something bitter. The Finvera Group headquarters sat like a gleaming glass temple in downtown Denver. 10 floors of numbers, forecasts, and forced smiles. I worked on the 6th financial operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was precise, predictable, safe. Or so I thought. My desk was in the far right corner, by the window. I liked it because I could watch the aspen leaves fall across the sidewalk outside. That morning, the trees were almost bare, the sky heavy with pre-snow clouds. I placed my coat on the back of my chair, booted up my computer, and as the blue glow of the screen lit up my face, I could already tell something was off. The company-wide email had arrived. Subject: upcoming bonus review policy, read carefully. I clicked it open and read the first few lines. In light of adjusted Q4 expectations and our strategic realignment, this quarter's bonus allocation will reflect a more agile and focused approach. I didn't need to read further to know what that meant. Most of us wouldn't see a dime. I heard the door to Marcus Langley's office open with a gentle swoosh. He walked out wearing one of his signature tailored suits, dark slate, crisp white shirt, no tie, the kind of man who always looked like he was on his way to fire someone or sell something expensive. He smiled, that managerial half-smile that never quite touched his eyes. Morning. Team, he called out, hands clasped. Quick sync in 5. Conference room B. Bring your thinking caps. I stared at my screen and exhaled slowly. Here we go, I muttered. Noelle, my best friend since day 2 at Finvera, peeked her head over the partition. She gave me that look, half sympathetic, half amused. He's going to corporate spin this, isn't he? I shrugged. He's already spinning it. I'm just here for the coffee. We filed into conference room B, the one with the dying ficus in the corner, and a whiteboard that no one used. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his fingers tapping the edge of his laptop as we settled in. He began with phrases like strategic vision, leaner operational mindset, and performance alignment. But what he really meant was, don't expect your bonus unless you walk on water and balance the books while doing it. Some folks nodded. A few took notes. I just stared down at my hands. Because I had the numbers, real ones. For the last 3 quarters, I'd quietly fixed a dozen anomalies that could have cost Finvera hundreds of thousands in audit penalties. I uncovered an undetected vendor overbilling loop, reversed outdated ledger rules that created budget bloats, and cross-referenced division expense reports to recover funds buried in travel redundancies. And I never made a fuss about it, never asked for anything except a working coffee machine and a chair that didn't squeak. Back at my desk, I opened a file labeled Q1, Q3 Impact R. It was clean, organized, color-coded, every key initiative listed with the problem it solved, the potential loss avoided, and the cost saved. I wasn't fishing for praise. I just believed data should speak louder than politics. I started typing the email. Hi, Marcus. Following this morning's discussion, I'd appreciate a quick conversation to review my eligibility for performance bonus consideration. Please see attached key contributions over the past 3 quarters. Thank you, Riley. I hovered over the send button longer than I should have. My fingers hesitated. Noelle walked over and placed a paper cup next to my keyboard. She didn't say anything right away, just let the coffee sit between us like a quiet offering. You gonna send it? She asked softly. Thinking about it, I replied. She leaned her elbow on the divider and dropped her voice. I mean, it's fair. You earned it. Yeah. But Marcus doesn't like it when people push. Then maybe he shouldn't be managing people. I gave her a small smile. Thanks. And then, with a deep breath, I clicked send. The next hour passed like molasses. My inbox stayed still. No ping, no response. By the time I looked up, the office was thinning out. People grabbing their coats, heading to early dinners or school pickups. At 4:03 p.m., my screen blinked. Let's talk tomorrow. No greeting, no signature. Just that. Noelle saw my face and mouthed, Did he reply? I nodded, showing her the screen. Classic, she muttered. Prepare for a discussion where you speak once and nod for the rest. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he'll surprise me. She shook her head. He doesn't do surprises, just statements. That night, I walked to my car with my coat zipped to my chin. The parking lot was quiet. The wind had picked up, and I could feel winter creeping in. I sat behind the wheel for a few minutes before starting the engine, staring ahead into the darkening dusk. I knew I had done the right thing. I had data, results, and reason. What I didn't have was power, not yet. That tomorrow turned out to be the day he demoted me. I sat across from Marcus, still wearing my usual navy cardigan, thinking this was just a formality. His office was cool, like always, the kind of sterile chill that made you wish you'd brought a second layer. I folded my hands neatly on my lap, back straight, eyes calm. Across from me, Marcus clicked something on his screen, then turned slightly, as if remembering I was in the room. He didn't smile. The silence stretched just a little too long. I counted it. 6 seconds. So, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. I read your email. I nodded once. Thank you. I appreciate the initiative, he added, voice measured. And I looked over your documentation. I didn't flinch at the pause before documentation, but I felt it like a flick to the chest. Your points were informative, he continued. But we've moved into a different phase now. The leadership team is focused on developing agile contributors who bring a collaborative mindset to cross-functional growth. I blinked. I believe my record supports that. He gave me a look, the kind that says, I already made my decision, but now I'm going to make you feel like I'm doing you a favor. That's not in question, he said, tapping his pen. It's more about alignment. Alignment, I repeated, evenly. With what? With where we're going, he replied, then gestured toward the folder in front of him. As of this morning, your role has been adjusted. You'll move to financial support analyst, reporting to Jenna in transactional ops, effective immediately. For a second, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. It was so sudden, so clinical, like he was reciting something from a playbook. That's a demotion, I said quietly. It's a realignment, he corrected, smiling faintly. There's a need there, and we believe your skills will help stabilize that team. It's not about punishment, it's about fit. I stared at the folder. I could already imagine what was inside. A new desk assignment, revised compensation, a soft HR memo explaining restructuring and opportunities for development. My fingers stayed locked together. May I ask why this decision was made now? Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering like he was giving me advice instead of a verdict. Riley, you're intelligent, efficient, no doubt, but sometimes people who operate well independently struggle with integrated collaboration. You don't always. Project leadership presence. I swallowed the words forming in my throat. Leadership presence. That was the justification. Not results, not contribution. But because I didn't walk around puffing up my chest and making speeches in the break room. I see, I said. He nodded, satisfied. I know it's unexpected. Take today to collect your things and report to Jenna in the morning. She's been briefed. I stood, slowly, deliberately. I picked up the folder without opening it. Is that all? He gave me the same smile he gave everyone. The one that never touched his eyes. Let's circle back in a few months. I'm sure you'll find this to be a growth opportunity. I walked out without saying another word. Back at my desk, Noelle was leaning against the filing cabinet, pretending to be interested in a stack of printer paper. When she saw my face, she straightened. Well, she whispered. I handed her the folder. She opened it, skimmed the first page, then looked up at me, horrified. He demoted you. I nodded. What the hell? I shook my head. It's done. He can't just... He did. The rest of the afternoon passed like a blur. I didn't pack much, just the photo of my dad and me from my first week at Finvera, the notebook I never let anyone borrow, and my favorite mechanical pencil, the one with the chipped grip. Everything else I left behind. At 3:45 p.m., I received the formal HR update, position reassigned, pay adjusted, effective immediately. They'd even copied my new manager on the thread, cheerful as can be. At 4:12, Noelle showed up at my desk with 2 hot chocolates instead of coffee. She sat beside me on the floor near the window, where I used to eat lunch alone during my first year. This is garbage, she said, voice low. Yeah, I whispered, my fingers around the warm cup. It is. We sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight fade behind the high-rises outside. You gonna let him get away with it? She asked eventually. I stared at my reflection in the window, barely visible in the darkened glass. No, I said quietly, but I'm not going to fight him in his ring. Noelle looked at me, confused. What does that mean? It means, I stood slowly, dusted off my skirt. I'm going to remind him that I never needed a title to matter. I didn't cry. I opened a private folder on my drive titled Contingency. That night, I went home and pulled out the manila envelope my aunt gave me 3 years ago. It wasn't just any envelope. It was the one she had handed me during an afternoon that, until now, had faded into the background of my memory. We were at her favorite cafe in Boulder, the Kettle and Vine tucked in a corner booth near the window, sipping tea and sharing slices of honey cake. I was 25, newly hired at Finvera, and she was freshly retired from the very company I now sat in each day. Her presence still lingered in the halls, like the kind of legacy no one wanted to acknowledge, but everyone still respected. That day, she slid the envelope across the table without ceremony. "Don't open this unless it's no longer about pride," she'd said softly, eyes scanning mine. I'd laughed, nervous. "Is it that bad?" She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "It's not about bad, sweetheart. It's about when doing it alone stops being noble and starts being self-inflicted." I didn't understand it then. I was determined to make my own name to be hired for my qualifications, not my last name. So I tucked the envelope away and never spoke of it again. Until now, I sat at the small kitchen table in my apartment, the lights dim, the Denver skyline flickering through the window, like a living constellation. I held the envelope in both hands, my fingers slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I'd tried not to become. Dependent, entitled, protected. But as I slid my thumb under the seal and opened it, I realized something. This wasn't about rescue. It was about revelation. Inside, there were 2 items: a crisp, notarized legal document and a handwritten letter. The paper had a slight scent of lavender, and the ink looked like it had been laid down with intention, every curve of every word deliberate. "Riley, if you're reading this, I trust you've reached a moment where silence is no longer survival. I've watched you grow with pride, and I've never wanted to interfere, but your father left you something most don't know about influence. Enclosed is the legal transfer of voting proxy for the 11.8% stake I retained when I stepped down. That stake now belongs to you, fully and legally. Use it wisely. Use it with grace. And never forget, power doesn't always look loud." Lauren. I read it once, twice, and then a third time, slower. Each sentence sank into me like a stone tossed in deep water. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. My father had passed away when I was 16. I didn't know much about his business holdings, only that he and Aunt Lauren had started Finvera with 2 other partners back when spreadsheets were still printed and faxed. He had left his shares in a trust. I'd assumed Lauren kept them, but now they were mine. All this time, I had been sitting in meetings, taking orders, crafting reports, under the command of people who saw me as just another quiet analyst, while silently holding more power than most of them combined. I turned to the legal document. It was dated the week I joined the company. I remembered Aunt Lauren being particularly emotional that week. Now I knew why. She had let me earn my place, but ensured I was never without options. And now, I needed one. I stayed up until after midnight, digging through Finvera's shareholder bylaws, policy manuals I had filed away but never truly studied. There it was, a section on minority stakeholders, proxy voting rights, and veto capabilities on compensation and departmental policy if holding exceeded 10%. 11.8. That number pulsed like a secret heartbeat. I drafted an email to Mr. Grayson Lauren's former legal counsel and the man who had helped structure much of Finvera's founding governance. Subject: shareholder proxy execution. Mr. Grayson, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing regarding the shareholder proxy file passed to me via Lauren Kane. I am ready to initiate review and exercise the rights outlined in the transfer documentation. Please advise on appropriate next steps. Riley Monroe. I sat there with the draft open for several long minutes. Then I hit send. The next morning, his reply came at 9:12. Mad, sharp, Miss Monroe. I've been expecting this. You are within your rights, and your timing is perfect. Let's meet Thursday at 10 a.m. My office, 3rd floor. G. I stared at the message, blinking slowly. This wasn't just about getting a bonus anymore. It was about accountability. It was about making sure that what had happened to me, and likely to others, wouldn't be repeated. And most of all, it was about honoring everything I'd built, in silence, without credit. That evening, I invited Noelle over. We sat on my small balcony, mugs of cider in hand, blankets wrapped around our shoulders as the temperature dipped. The lights of the city flickered below us. And somewhere in the distance, A train horn echoed. She looked at me over the rim of her mug. You seem calm. Too calm. I smiled. It's clarity. You want to talk about it? I hesitated, then nodded. I told her everything about the envelope, the proxy, the meeting with Grayson. Her eyes widened with every sentence. You've been sitting on that kind of power and didn't use it. I didn't want to, not until now. She leaned forward. So what are you going to do? I looked out toward the skyline. I'm going to show Marcus that the person he pushed aside can push back. She was quiet for a beat. You're not just going to get your bonus, are you? I turned to her, and this time, my smile wasn't soft. It was sharp, clear. I'm going to decide everyone else's. Marcus had no idea the girl he shoved into the corner desk now sat on the shareholders' weekly agenda. I sat in a smaller conference room that Tuesday afternoon, just one floor above my old department. The room was modest, not the high-ceilinged executive boardroom with polished walnut paneling, but quiet, clean, and very private. A long glass window overlooked downtown Denver, and I watched people pass below, oblivious to how many lives were being shaped above them in buildings just like this. Across from me, Mr. Grayson placed a single folder on the table. He was in his late 60s, grey hair combed back with meticulous care, a presence that radiated quiet authority. He didn't smile much, but he didn't need to. You're officially recorded as the acting proxy holder for Mrs. Kane's 8%, he said, sliding the folder toward me, which means, legally speaking, you have full voting rights on compensation strategy, structural reorganization, and should it become necessary, interim veto power over financial policy. I nodded, absorbing the weight of every word. And you're sure you want to exercise it now? He added, his gaze holding mine. I am, I said. And I want to do it quietly, no disruption, just the truth, delivered at the right time. He leaned back. Smart. Lauren would approve. That name Lauren still sat heavily in my chest, not because she was gone, but because she had stayed silent all those years, letting the next generation learn their own lessons. She could have stepped in earlier, but maybe she knew the kind of power I needed wasn't the kind that arrives wrapped in protection. It needed to come after pain. We reviewed the documents for an hour, outlining the process. Mr. Grayson would file the internal notice that I had assumed proxy responsibilities, effective immediately. This meant that I could attend the upcoming Q4 shareholders strategy meeting and speak as a voting participant, and more importantly, I could challenge Marcus's proposed bonus restructuring. I knew he had plans. Whispers were floating around about slashing mid-level bonuses while incentivizing leadership with extra perks. No one had confirmed it, but I could read the patterns, the same way I used to read broken budgets and unreconciled invoices, with intuition honed by experience. I spent that evening preparing like I was about to sit for the biggest exam of my life. Spreadsheets, meeting transcripts, employee performance reviews. I wanted a clear, factual picture of who contributed what, and how Marcus had positioned his own numbers. It was subtle but clear. He shifted credit, inflated initiative ownership, rebranded team efforts as his own strategic foresight. Wednesday, I kept my head down. Noelle, of course, noticed the difference. You've been quiet, she said, sliding into the break room beside me. Focused, I replied. She narrowed her eyes. Focused. Riley is usually scary, Riley. I smirked. I've got a meeting tomorrow morning. With who? Let's just say, upstairs. Her mouth opened slightly. You're going to the quarterly. I nodded. As a shareholder. Her eyes widened. Wait, you're... I held a finger to my lips. Not yet. After tomorrow. She blinked at me for a long second, then smiled slow, wide, proud. God, I wish I could be in the room when he finds out. So do I said, sipping my tea. And I will be. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright. The kind of Colorado day that tricks you into thinking winter isn't creeping in. I dressed carefully navy blouse, tailored slacks, a silver necklace my father gave me before he passed. It wasn't armor, it was memory, purpose. Mr. Grayson met me in the lobby, briefcase in hand. You ready? He asked. More than ever. We walked together into the main conference hall on the 20th floor, the same room where Marcus had handed me my demotion a week ago. Except now, I wasn't here as a subordinate. I was here to vote. Marcus stood at the front, mid-presentation. Charts flickered across the screen behind him. Bar graphs, percentages, proposed compensation matrices, and by streamlining mid-level performance incentives, we create bandwidth to reward division leaders who've driven strategy across Q3 and Q4. In doing so, we ensure retention at the top, while encouraging rising talent to align with leadership expectations. Grayson and I slipped into 2 empty seats at the side table near the front. Marcus didn't even glance at me, not yet. He was too busy impressing the senior directors, too caught up in the cadence of his pitch. When he finally did notice me, his jaw stiffened, but he kept going. As he wrapped his presentation, Mr. Neil, the current acting CEO, invited comments from the table. Grayson raised his hand, nodded toward me, and said, "Miss Monroe would like to speak." You could have heard a pin drop. I stood slowly, my palms flat against the wood table. "Good morning," I said, calm and clear. "I'd like to respond to the proposal just outlined, particularly with regard to bonus allocations." Marcus interrupted, voice tight. "Miss Monroe isn't in this division. She's here on behalf of a voting shareholder." Grayson cut in smoothly. "She has full rights to speak and vote on this matter." Neil raised a brow. "Confirmed, confirmed," Grayson replied. Marcus looked like someone had kicked out the legs of the chair he wasn't sitting on. I opened my folder, pulled out the same spreadsheet I'd once emailed Marcus, but this time I had receipts, documentation, pattern suppression of credit, selective metrics that favored leadership while diminishing team-based gains. I presented for 7 minutes, no embellishment, no drama, just truth. And when I was done, I sat down without a word. David Neal cleared his throat and said, "Thank you, Mrs. Monroe. Your perspective is noted and necessary." Marcus didn't speak again. I didn't come this far to whisper. I came to bring the room to a full stop. The quarterly meeting was held in the main conference room, the same place Marcus once handed me a demotion letter. But this time, I wasn't entering as the quietly displaced analyst. I walked in with purpose, heels tapping against the marble tile, like a drumline only I could hear. The conference table stretched across the center like a command bridge, surrounded by men and women in muted suits, sipping coffee from branded mugs and skimming printed handouts that Marcus had no doubt prepared with military precision. He was already there, of course, standing at the head of the room, laser pointer in one hand, a slide titled Strategic Retention Through Performance Allocation glowing behind him. As I took my seat, I noticed a flicker in his eyes, recognition, and something else, discomfort. He hadn't expected me to show up again. Not here, not now. Mr. Neil, Finvera's acting CEO, nodded politely at me but said nothing. Marcus gave no greeting, just a tight-lipped pause before diving back into his presentation. As I was saying, Marcus continued, "The updated bonus framework will reward division leads who've demonstrated cross-quarter strategic impact while reallocating lower-tier incentives toward long-term development funds." He clicked forward. The next slide displayed bar graphs, color-coded by department. At first glance, it looked like data-neutral and informative, but I knew better. It was selective storytelling, the kind of presentation that erased nuance and inflated ego. By trimming underperforming cost centers, Marcus went on, we free up room to reinforce high-level retention and maintain leadership stability into Q1. Leadership stability. That was his euphemism for paying himself and his peers more while shrinking recognition for the rest of us. When he finished, a few people clapped, lightly, out of habit. Then Miss Neal turned to the table. "Any questions? Comments?" Grayson, sitting quietly beside me in a navy pinstripe suit, gave a slight nod. I stood, and for a moment, the room fell still. "I'd like to offer a response to the proposal," I said. My voice was steady, not loud, not sharp, but clear enough to carry across every inch of glass and steel in that room. Marcus straightened. "With respect, Riley is not currently in a leadership position. She is here," Grayson interrupted, "as proxy to an active shareholder holding 11.8% equity. That stake grants her the right to speak, vote, and submit policy objections under Article 6, Clause B." Mr. Neal raised an eyebrow. "Confirmed, confirmed," Grayson replied, sliding a certified document across the table. All eyes turned to me. I opened my folder. The same folder I had once built in the shadows of overtime evenings and skipped lunches. Except this time, it wasn't just for my eyes. I handed out copies, already pre-printed and bound. As you'll see on page 2, I began, bonus trends for Q2 and Q3 show that divisional leads claimed project ownership on initiatives that were, in fact, cross-departmental. Many of these efforts relied on staff at lower tiers, including financial ops, analytics, and HR. I paused. Those contributions, I continued, are entirely omitted from this current compensation proposal. A rustle of pages followed. Mr. Neal frowned as he flipped through his copy. Marcus said nothing. Additionally, I went on, in the last 6 months, leadership self-evaluations submitted to HR include language that mirrors team project descriptions, suggesting a pattern of credit misattribution. A few heads turned toward Marcus. I turned to Grayson, who handed me the final document, a highlighted section from Finvera's governance policy. As shareholder proxy, I'm invoking Clause 6. Be to veto this proposal pending independent audit. Marcus's jaw clenched. You can't be serious, he muttered. I'm not only serious, I said calmly. I'm within full legal rights. The data I've submitted will be verified by third-party review. Until then, any restructuring of the bonus framework is frozen. The silence in the room was total. No one moved. Then, Miss Neal leaned back in his chair. Well, he said slowly, this is certainly unexpected. He turned toward Marcus. Your presentation will be noted. But until this audit is completed, I'm placing all compensation shifts on hold. Marcus looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under his entire quarter. Mr. Neal turned to me. Mr. Monroe, would you be willing to advise the interim review committee? I nodded once. I'd be honored. The room began to stir. Conversations broke out in low voices. Marcus still hadn't moved. He stared at the papers in front of him, like they might rearrange themselves into something that made him feel in control again. But they wouldn't. Not this time. As I gathered my things, Noelle appeared at the back of the room. She'd gotten in. Somehow, HR always had ways. Her eyes met mine, wide with disbelief, and then slowly curved into a grin so wide it could have carried both of us through the door. I walked past Marcus without a glance, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the rules I used to survive by, so no one else would have to. Marcus's face went pale, and for the first time, he had nothing to say. Monday morning, I was moved back to my old desk, but this time, I didn't sit down. I walked past it slowly, letting my fingers graze the edge of the familiar surface. The same desk where I once spent late nights correcting financial anomalies, quietly fixing problems no one else noticed, where I used to eat lunch alone, where I had once been handed a demotion without even a pretense of dignity. Now, it was just a memory. A kind voice called out behind me. Riley. I turned. It was Jenna, the woman Marcus had temporarily assigned as my supervisor. After the realignment, she looked sheepish, just wanted to say, I didn't agree with how that went down, she said gently. You handled it better than most would. Thank you, I replied, and meant it, not for the compliment, but for the acknowledgement. I made my way upstairs. The 21st floor wasn't where analysts sat. It wasn't even where managers sat. It was where governance lived, where policy was shaped, and where decisions were made that affected every employee down to the temp who restocked paper towels in the break room. David Neal greeted me at the conference lounge with a warm handshake. We're finalizing the new compensation transparency framework, he said. I'd like you to be part of the review panel. I'd be glad to. He nodded. You know, your aunt always said the quiet ones are the ones to watch. She wasn't wrong, I said with a small smile. I was officially named to Finvera's Reward Governance Committee, a group designed to oversee and balance compensation decisions between leadership and staff. It wasn't a flashy title. It didn't come with press releases or glass plaques, but it came with something better: influence. Later that afternoon, I walked back to floor 6 to gather a few personal things I had left behind. Noelle was waiting near the elevators, leaning against the wall with a smug expression. Well, she said, you've become folklore. Already, apparently, people on floor 9 are calling you the spreadsheet assassin. I laughed. That's both flattering and mildly terrifying. She reached into her tote and pulled out a gift bag. You're not getting out of here without opening this. Inside was a mug that read, I've got receipts. I burst out laughing. You're ridiculous. No, she corrected, grinning. You're impressive. Marcus was no longer on floor 6. Word had spread that he had been reassigned to an internal projects division. A polite way of saying he was being shelved. HR would never admit it was a demotion, but everyone knew. What mattered more to me wasn't his fall. It was the ripple effect. Several mid-level managers, who had previously been overlooked, were now part of leadership mentoring circles. The performance review system was being restructured to include team-based credit, not just top-down attribution. That Friday, I received an unexpected invitation from David Neal to co-facilitate a winter mentorship initiative for emerging analysts. It wasn't part of my job description, but it was exactly the kind of quiet, structural work that changed lives long after applause faded. Before leaving for the weekend, I stood one last time outside my old desk. I'd outgrown it, not just the space, but what it once represented. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to have a seat at the table. In the workplace, it's easy to overlook those who speak softly and work quietly, but real strength doesn't always demand attention. It earns respect through consistency, integrity, and action. Riley's journey is a reminder that dignity and data can be more powerful than titles and noise. When faced with injustice, she didn't retaliate with anger. She responded with truth. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Never underestimate someone just because they're not loud. The person you dismiss today might be the one who decides your future tomorrow. Power doesn't need volume, just the right moment to speak.